Hi, welcome to another episode of the Commonwealth Magazine Codcast in partnership with TransitMatters. I'm your host, Josh Fairchild. I'm a board member here at TransitMatters.
And I'm your co-host, Jim Aloisi. I'm also on the board of TransitMatters.
Today we're joined by Chris Osgood. He's the Chief of Streets for the City of Boston. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me.
Chris, a couple of things we wanted to talk to you about today. I guess the first one is, I know that you and TransitMatters and a variety of other folks, City of Cambridge, Somerville, and others have been working really closely with the MBTA on improving bus service in the early morning and late night hours. The T began the early morning pilot, I think about a month and a half ago, April 1st.
April 1st.
I hear it's an enormous success. And I think we have the expectation that what we call night bus, which is the late night service from 1 a.m. to 4 or 5 a.m., we might have a pilot up and running sometime in the fall right after Labor Day. So I wanted to ask you, from the city's perspective, how's the early morning bus going, and what are your thoughts about being able to celebrate 24/7 service sometime in the fall?
Sure. We're absolutely thrilled by the fact that sunrise service has started, as you said, started on April 1st. In many ways, it's been a really great last 6 weeks for transit in the city of Boston and the Boston region. I think it was April 1st we started sunrise service, or the MBTA started sunrise service. I believe April 23rd is when the MBTA started the SL3. And at the beginning of this month is when the T and the city collaborated on the Rosendale bus pilot. So a lot of good things that are going forward. And just as you said, that work is really the result of a lot of good collaboration and partnership. And I give a lot of credit to TransitMatters for your long-term advocacy around late night, overnight bus service, really as an equity issue within our city and within our region. And so as you're well aware, we've done a lot of work with the T, with our partners in Somerville and Cambridge, and certainly with you, to really document the need for service that goes beyond 1 a.m. and that starts before 6 a.m. So we're thrilled that the MBTA has launched sunrise service, that we've got people who now have a chance to ride a bus. I think there's 17 new bus trips that are happening before 5 a.m. That are sort of part of the sunrise service offering. And as you said, we've heard as well, anecdotally at this point, that it's been well received and they're getting really good ridership.
Yeah, and to our listeners, sunrise service sounds a little spiritual. And for many of us, bus service is spiritual in a way, but this service is helping people who have to get to jobs really early, get to those jobs. And I would just say and acknowledge we appreciate Mayor Walsh's commitment and leadership, and yours, Chris, to working with us and others and the T to make that happen. So we're glad to see that. Now, in connection with better bus transit, the city is also working with the T to do some interesting experiment might be the wrong word, but pilots on improving bus service using dedicated bus lanes.
Absolutely.
I know you've been doing that in Rosendale recently. Give us a sense of what's going on and how that's working out.
Sure. So we've been working with our partners at the MBTA and certainly the community of Rosendale to help everybody who is riding on a bus between Rosendale Square and Forest Hills to be able to have a more reliable commute. So last winter we did sort of a 2-day test of what it would be like to provide a dedicated lane in a lane that is typically used for parking in the morning. That then sort of rolled into what is a 4-week pilot, which started May 7th and will run through the beginning of June. And through that pilot, essentially, we are providing that dedicated lane inbound in a lane that is typically used for parking in the mornings. And by providing a lane that is dedicated for not just MBTA buses, but also school buses and bikes, we're providing, I think, at least in our initial feedback that we've heard, some very good, more consistent service and more desirable service for people who are using that dedicated lane. And additionally, by not having buses sort of weave in and out of other vehicular traffic, we're also able to help people who are driving a car as well be able to get through that corridor more efficiently.
Have you had any feedback about how bikes are negotiating that bus and it's also a bike lane?
Yep, absolutely. So we've certainly heard. We've certainly heard some good feedback at this point. It's largely anecdotal, but from the Rosy Bikes community, and they really like the dedicated lane. It gives sort of a broader area and a more sort of safe and comfortable ride sort of in that key corridor every morning. So it's been a very, very well received by that community as well.
What's the length of this dedicated lane? Do you know?
Yeah, it's about a mile. It runs from essentially where Cummins Highway intersects with Washington Street up to Ukraine Way, at which point it then sort of re-enters sort of mixed traffic that lasts maybe 100 yards until it gets to the sort of upper busway at Forest Hills.
So how closely did the city work with the local residents and businesses and the T, obviously, before this got implemented? Tell us a little bit about what that process looks like and how it works. So
Sure. So there was, I would say, a pair of different sort of moments of coordination. One was just a broad effort in figuring out what are some of the key areas in the city that we should really be prioritizing for dedicated bus lanes or for transit signal priority for buses. This particular corridor actually has a majority of people, both in the AM commute and in the PM commute, on buses as opposed to in cars or on bikes that are in this corridor. So it seemed a natural one for us to be able to prioritize. Right along with that, there was some very strong community outreach, particularly from groups like Walk Up Razi that had a great interest in us figuring out how we actually make buses go through this corridor more reliably. All of that sort of helped us identify this as a key priority area for us. And ever since then, we've had a lot of outreach with neighborhood organizations, business by business, sort of making sure that people were able to voice their thoughts and opinions as we develop the pilot, and certainly that continues now. So anybody who has an opinion on the pilot, we encourage them to reach out to the Transportation Department. BTD has been a terrific leader in doing a lot of that outreach so that folks can reach out to BTD and give their feedback on the pilot. And we hope to be taking some of that feedback and rolling that into the evaluation of whether this pilot should be sustained after its completion.
Chris, do you have any data yet on time maybe that's being saved?
So not yet, but we will be able to get that data both from school buses and MBTA buses, looking at both sort of the speed of the trip, but also just the overall reliability of that trip. Our buses really coming through that corridor at the predicted pace, and that's one of the key sort of stats that we're looking at in this.
You bring up a really good point with saying that school buses are also using this, which is, I think, a very perhaps overlooked by a lot of people importance, not only on that corridor, but pretty much every major corridor in the city. Is the number of school buses using a route in addition to the transit share going to be considered when you roll this out to other places?
Absolutely. And to your point, when we were first focused on this, really we were looking at MBTA trips. And in collaboration and conversation with the Boston Public Schools, we realized how important it was and how valuable it was to be able to also create this as a way of making sure that kids get to school on time. And so that is certainly one of the things we're going to be looking at. What are those corridors where there's a high number of BPS school kids on buses, as well as a high number of people who are on MBTA buses? So
one thing that Jim brought up and you also mentioned was the heavy involvement of groups in Rosendale activating and advocating for this bus pilot. Yep. They have some extraordinarily active groups there with Walk Up Razi and Razi Bikes and things like that. And they've also been very active with trying to make sure, working with Livable Streets and others, try to make sure that the community and bus riders are giving their feedback for this and saying that that they are appreciating it. I have a twofold concern. One is, why do we need subjective feedback as opposed to just data to tell us that this works and where to use it in the future? And secondly is, should we be concerned that communities who don't have that type of activation will not be considered for a future rollout of bus lanes? That's
a great question, great pair of questions. So really the thing that is in many ways driving our prioritization is from an understanding of within the system, where are there high numbers of bus riders going very low speed? So there was some great research by CTPS that essentially highlighted this. Sorry, will I silence my phone? And we're using that in many ways as the way in which we're going to prioritize where we're going to be doing our focal work. That paired with the key corridors that were identified in Go Boston 2030 that perhaps are not served or not served as well as they could be right now, places like Mattapan Square to the LMA or North Station to the South Boston waterfront. That sort of data backbone really sort of guides the bulk of our work. I do think that there is things that get picked up through qualitative feedback that really actually help us refine a pilot. What do we do at particular intersections? How do we think about curbside pickup and drop off for daycare? How do we think about handling commercial loading for retail establishments? These are the sort of things that are harder to pick up from data sets and really require face-to-face conversations with businesses to figure out how do we get them right in these corridors.
Does the city have personnel that are gathering the feedback, or are they relying on partner advocacy groups?
Both. So we've been greatly aided by Livable Streets. They've been a terrific partner in this process, doing a lot of really good outreach, as well as MAPC, which helped us with a fabulous parking study to understand how the curb was really being used on that stretch on Washington Street. We also have a number of people from the Boston Transportation Department who have really been going truly business by business, door to door, getting feedback, and a lot of credit to Pat Hoey, who's one of the planners who works for Vineet Gupta and Gina Fiandaca, who has done a lot of that on the ground outreach. Speaking
of BTD personnel, I think that's a perfect segue into the kind of next topic we wanted to discuss, which was the infusion, the commitment by the city of future parking revenues towards transportation improvements and personnel, so operations, and maybe capital too. But maybe you could explain more to us how the money would be used, how it's going to be split out, and what type of personnel you're looking to hire.
It is absolutely the perfect segue. We realized sort of through this process that implementing and running things like a dedicated bus lane really do take significant staff time. And the mayor wanted to make sure that we had the staff able to actually not just do it in one corridor, in one neighborhood, but really expand that more broadly throughout the city, which is why the mayor announced as part of his proposed FY19 budget, we would be updating our parking fines and using the revenue that we would expect from the updated parking fines to really improve transportation across a number of the key things that were identified in Go Boston 2030. One of those things is to create the city's first ever transit team. This would be a team that essentially allows us to do things like coordinate with the MBTA more directly on big capital projects, but also work with them on corridor strategies and specific efforts, things like transit signal priority for the Silver Line, things like dedicated bus lanes in more places throughout the city. That transit team would have a sort of lead transit coordinator, as well as an engineer who could work on some of the TSP projects, and then specific people who would be out in the field every single day managing a dedicated bus lane, putting up the signs, coordinating with constituents, and enforcing the actual dedicated bus lane.
Making sure bus lanes stay painted and things like that.
All those things, exactly right.
So optimally, this would begin sometime after July 1st?
That's right. So there are a couple of steps. Later this week, on Thursday, May 24th, we'll be having a city council hearing on the updated parking fines, and we can have sort of as an aside about the parking fines. These are things which really haven't been adjusted since 2008. We're looking to bring them up to sort of more what we've seen from peer cities across the rest of the country, and is really a response to the fact that we have seen a skyrocketing number of requests for parking enforcement from constituents across the city. By updating fines around a number of things, we think we're going to be able to improve street conditions as is, but we'd also be able to take some of that new revenue and be able to hire staff after July 1st of this year that can help us push forward our transit work. In addition, really push forward things like more dedicated or protected bike lanes, improve the safety of some of our key intersections in the city, expand our neighborhood slow streets programs, and a variety of other investments.
I think it's a really smart first step to sort of go to the folks who are violators or scofflaws to say, well, we're going to charge you more, but we're going to use that money in a very specific, transparent, and appropriate way. So good luck with this. I think many of us are looking forward to seeing it. I think it also goes to, this whole conversation is really about the renaissance of bus. You know, that Boston is a world-class city, 24/7 city, and even though the MBTA runs the bus system, Boston has a clear, just like every other city in town, in the MBTA inner core, has a clear interest in thinking about how the bus experience can be improved in ways that reduce traffic congestion, create safety, create higher levels of accessibility for people, for seniors, and frankly, safer travel for students. So it's good to see the city partnering with not just advocacy groups, but the T, as we're really transforming how we think about the bus transit experience. Is that a major part of where you see the city's focus over the next several years? I know you've got a lot on your plate, but...
As we think about the role of the transit team, it really is focused primarily on how we improve buses. And as you said, that is a collaboration between the MBTA and municipalities. We certainly recognize that in the city of Boston. And we are excited about the progress we've made over the last 6 weeks, and excited about the work that we have in front of us that we still need to get done. As you think about the big challenges that Boston faces, how we manage growth, how we increase equity, how we improve resiliency and reduce emissions, helping more people get on the bus is key to that. And that really means improving the bus experience, making it more reliable, making it more efficient as it courses through our city. And that has a lot to do with our signals, has a lot to do with how we use our streets. And that is why we're doing things like updating our parking fines so that we can actually invest in a transit team in the city.
Do you have an idea of how that $5 million estimated would break down between capital and personnel hiring?
So it is majority actually capital. So it would there's a little over between $1 million and $2 million for personnel, and the balance would actually be for capital, which would go into things like roadway resurfacing, repairing sidewalks, and making investments that are actually sort of particular to a new way in which we're doing sidewalk investment in the city of Boston. We're really looking at building or rebuilding sort of good pedestrian networks that support things like good transit travel across the city. In the past, our sidewalk capital budget has largely been based on where we've done maintenance repairs in the past, so taking something from a temporary repair to a permanent repair. While we'll still be doing some of that, what we've realized is that by only doing that, you actually miss rebuilding some of those key pedestrian corridors in our city, particularly in places that have chronically been underinvested in the past.
Do you think that might include things like bus bulb outs or platforms that are elevated to speed boarding?
Absolutely. So we're in fact, although not funded through this, through a project which is kicking off this year, the reconstruction of Summer Street between the Four Point Channel and West Service Road. We're actually going to be rebuilding those bus stops to actually better accommodate bus boarding as part of it.
I guess the last question that I have on the this topic is, how do you see? I know you've talked about working with the MBTA a lot. Between municipalities is probably going to be very important. And how do you see that happening? Do the other municipalities have people in like similar transit teams that you'll be able to work with?
So the Boston Transportation Department has been convening what they're calling the Better Bus Working Group, and one of those pieces, one of those meetings, sort of typically includes people from Cambridge and occasionally Somerville. So we're thinking about how we work as a region and not just as a city. And I think that's critical. I mean, nobody necessarily thinks of their daily commute by municipal boundaries. They think much more regionally or across municipal borders, and we want to make sure that our planning and our implementation really reflects that.
Chris, I know we're short on time. You've got to be at a meeting back at City Hall. As we close this session out with you, what should our listeners be looking forward to over the next 12 months or so coming out of your department? Is it basically the beginning of implementing Go Boston 2030? What's the takeaway that you'd like to have listeners have in terms of the work you're doing?
So I think that's exactly right, that we have gone from a moment where we were engaging a city in planning to now really engaging the city in the implementation of Go Boston 2030. And that really requires us to be able to expand our staff capacity and work even more intensively with communities to be able to get out onto the streets some of the things that are outlined in Go Boston 2030, things like dedicated bus lanes in some of the key corridors in our city. I also think that where we are now is really the result of a lot of good engagement and advocacy by a large number of organizations. Organizations like TransitMatters, also community organizations. And so I think that one of the things that I would expect to continue to see is sort of deep engagement with both Boston community organizations, regional organizations, and other municipalities to figure out how we as a region really change the conversation around transportation and get more people on transit.
Chris Osgood, City of Boston's Chief of Streets. Thank you for joining Josh and I today on the Codcast.
My pleasure.
So, Josh, it was good to have Chris Osgood here, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about the sort of what I call this bus renaissance. We've got the City of Everett doing a lot in connection with demonstrating the usefulness of dedicated bus lanes. We've got Boston doing this in Roslindale. Boston had an experiment before that in Washington Street. Later this year, as I understand it, you're going to see similar pilot programs in Cambridge and in Arlington. So there's clearly an effort within the inner core, and I heard the other day Somerville wanted to do something as well, to transform how people are perceiving the bus transit experience. My feeling of this is it's a very positive thing, but it also is a threatening thing. There are people, long-term residents of neighborhoods, maybe don't fully understand its implications to them. Businesses sometimes are concerned that it might have a negative impact on foot traffic. I think the question to you is, how do we get the message out that people ought to embrace these experiments, take a look at them, and actually participate in refining them, not be threatened by them?
Well, I think the question becomes a little easier when you think about the numbers. So we're beginning these pilots in corridors that already have a large plurality, if not a majority, of total people passing through those corridors. So you have fewer vehicles being buses carrying a majority of the people. So the question really becomes, how do you activate those people? Because if you add up the cumulative, time, wasted or saved between actual number of persons, then it's quite significant. And I think that it kind of answers the question for itself. And I think if you're thinking about a lot of these things can rise or fall based on the advocacy within City Hall of city councilors and things like that. And I think if they've got sort of the black and white, as well as some anecdotal stories from some people that they can connect with in their neighborhoods, then they'll begin to see that this is a real savings and really benefiting a lot of people, because the net out, it will. Some people will feel that their travel is being impinged upon, but I think we need to focus on the net out for the whole system, as well as we need to find ways of using metrics and data to measure the savings also to the MBTA. Buses will run more on their schedule. They'll be arriving sooner at their terminus. They'll be able to turn around and go back. That means we would expect at least 10% increase in bus service just based on making these kinds of changes. I mean, 10% is what you get from just switching to all-door boarding. That's not even counting the bus lane itself. So it could be quite significant when you add all the things that we know we should be doing and we can see in other places.
Yeah, I've been thinking more and more lately about the streetscape as a taxpayer-funded environment. It may be obvious to people, but it seems to me that what we're beginning to recognize is we're all citizens and taxpayers. We all should have a fair shot at how that streetscape functions for us. And so the desire to have safe cycling lanes, the desire to see dedicated bus lanes, as well as parking and mobility and pedestrian mobility, each one of those people in mobility, whether it's the driver, whether it's the walker, whether it's the cyclist, or whether it's the people on the bus, they're all paying the same share of tax dollar for that streetscape. They need to be treated equitably. That has not been true because we've been dealing with an old mid-20th century paradigm which gave only the driver that priority.
Well, and frankly, when there wasn't as much congestion, then it wasn't really holding back buses too much. So, when there was the very first interplay between streetcars and automobiles, you still had streetcars running in the middle of the streets, and there wasn't enough traffic yet for it to be an issue. And we had the same issue, the same thing happened in the 50s and 60s with buses. There just wasn't enough congestion altogether. I mean, there were in downtown areas, but in the neighborhoods, you weren't seeing as much of this.
No, and now we're suffering from chronic congestion, and I think you see more and more people trying to devise ways to relieve it. I think T for Mass is talking about congestion pricing as a way to change behavior and reduce congestion on the highway system. I think having dedicated bus lanes is another way to think about congestion within the urban core. Right? We all know how congested it is. People do need to think about changing behavior, but you're not going to get more people on a bus unless you give them a better bus experience.
Yeah.
And the best, if you go to any great city in the world, the best bus experiences are the ones where you see guys on the bus in shirt sleeves and guys standing next to guys in cufflinks, right? It's egalitarian, everyone's on it, and they're on it because it's the best way to get from point A to point B.
And I think you're seeing that a lot in places like Southie and Roslindale and JP. You're seeing a lot of bus riders who are going downtown for whatever their white-collar job is, and they're mixing with all the other people that I think a lot of a lot of citizens may still assume are riding the bus, but it's a true mixture. And to the extent that that mixture continues to exist and even improves, that will increase the advocacy to make these things actually happen. And also, I think making that mixture of riders, besides simply making it known the number of riders that are choosing one mode or the other, bus versus a car, it's also really important for us to know what is the mix of the people riding those buses and what is the purpose of their ride, because that's another piece of information that I think is important for politicians and others that need to gather the data and crunch that data to know, and which feeds into kind of a systematic look at our bus system. Our bus system in Boston, as well as most other cities that have legacy systems, but more so in Boston, where we had a very intricate or a very large streetcar system, is that our bus system is based on streetcar routes, and we don't have a lot of grid type roads, and so we still have the same buses on the same routes. And as the region has grown, driven by Route 128 being built out, and also driven by more recently infill real estate prices, driving these things, we have a lot more travel that doesn't just go downtown or requires transfers. And if you're just going downtown to transfer, then that's adding extra time to your trip. It's also adding congestion to the transit system in those downtown nodes. And I think one thing that is very exciting that the MBTA is launching, and the city of Boston will be able to help with their new transit team, is reimagining what bus service should look like. The urban ring was something that was, I'm sure you're very familiar with, was brought up as how can we have a circumferential transportation option? And of course, we were talking about doing this with the Green Line or separated right-of-way, light rail or subway in a lot of places. But it was very difficult to do that, going through Brookline or Roxbury or places like that. And I think buses, some of it we're seeing happen with the Silver Line. And probably the next stage of the Silver Line will actually have finished off maybe a third of that entire vision.
Well, yeah, this dirty little secret is Silver Line 3 is phase one of what was used to be called Urban Ring, right?
Right.
And I think there's some interest in maybe expanding that out to Everett.
Sure. And but places like Somerville, Cambridge, Brookline, and parts of Boston, finishing that ring is not really going to be possible probably with the separated, at least in the early stages, it's going to be much more economical and feasible to do this with the kinds of treatments we're talking about in the Rosendale bus lane.
Well, we're lucky. Look, we've got a mayor in Boston, a mayor in Everett, mayor in Somerville. We've got councilors and town managers in Cambridge and Chelsea who all get the importance of bus transit, and they seem to be doing it all uniformly at the same time. It's an encouraging development, and I think that people who are listeners of the Transit Matters podcast need to think about the importance of bus transit, support it, think about how to support these elected officials as they're doing this, because many other places nationally or in the world this has already happened. In Boston, we're still pushing the envelope, we're pioneering, and we need to use these developments and leverage them, I think, to really prove to people that bus is not what they think it used to be, but it can be something much better.
Yeah, and I think one of the exciting things about using bus as a mode is that you really can get a lot of bang for your investment buck. So there's a lot of places in Boston that probably, if you look at the ridership between origin and destination pairs where people are coming from and want to go, that probably would justify a subway tunnel or things like that. Like if you really look at where things are and where they're headed, the cost is so exorbitant that it's going to take us a while to get around to all those projects. We've got projects that are on the shelf that have to be dealt with first. But with bus, and once we have a transit team in the city, and of course other cities are having these too, we can work together to more quickly implement these kinds of solutions and figure out the best way to do it to where we're sort of softly landing these things and not scaring people with quick rollout of huge changes to their lives. But one of the things that Transit Matters had put out into the thought cloud was, for example, on Summer Street, you have a commercial area, a very wide street for Boston. We had kind of envisioned that as, you could eventually, and not too much time, but in phases, make Summer Street sort of the backbone of a new network that reimagines how the seaport is connected to places like Dudley Square and North Station and the Back Bay. Just by doing some tweaks and some additions with the resources we already have, you could expand a bus lane type treatments, priority type treatments, maybe not along entire roads, but in certain congested corridors, to allow connections, say from North Station to City Point. And maybe there could be 6 different routes or 3 to 6 different routes that could do that.
Yeah, no, I think we're all looking forward to Summer Street. It's a key route, getting people to and from Logan, getting people to and from parts of South Boston, supporting the Seaport District, supporting equity from people coming in on the Fairmount line at South Station. I think we all need to stay tuned and hope that is something that we can look to in the future as an important bus transit.
And frankly, if you're thinking about international best practices about how to get these things going for easy wins. I mean, we want to include every neighborhood that needs these, but going for easy wins in areas that are highly visible to the most people. And that's one of the, Roslindale bus corridor, that's great for the people who live there. But a much higher percentage of the entire metropolitan area is going through the Seaport on a daily basis than is going down Washington Street in Roslindale.
Much higher profile.
Right. And being a commercial area, you're not having to fight with people over a bus stop being moved or placed on the front lawn. So there's a lot of things that are exciting about an area like that as a way to, we can make some changes here without really disrupting, where people are living. Not only that, but if one of our concerns in using streetscape is worrying about maybe parking revenues, we just built a huge parking garage in the Seaport. There's lots of lots, and there's lots of ways that we can think about funding sharing of revenues from parking as the city begins to think about how to best use the curb space.
Well, thank you, Josh. That'll do it for now. Let's wrap this one up. I'm Jim Aloisi.
And I'm Josh Fairchild.
See you next time.